The sun was bleeding out over Dust Hollow when the stagecoach rolled to a stop, its wheels grinding against the packed earth like bones on stone. The driver spat tobacco juice into the dirt and hollered something about this being the last stop before hell itself. Most folks who ended up in Dust Hollow would agree with that assessment. June Emery stepped down from the coach with nothing but a worn leather bag and the kind of straight-backed pride that marked her as trouble. Her sandy brown hair was pinned tight against the prairie wind, and those gray eyes of hers swept the ramshackle buildings like she was taking inventory of what little the world had left to offer. The boarding house sat crooked on Main Street, paint peeling off its sides like old scabs. A hand-painted sign swung on rusty chains: Maybell's Rest, clean beds, hot meals. June had counted her coins twice on the journey. She had enough for 3 nights, maybe 4 if she skipped supper. Inside, the place smelled of lye soap and yesterday's stew. Maybelle Hopkins stood behind a counter scarred by years of elbows and spilled whiskey, her widow's weeds hanging loose on her bony frame. She looked June up and down with the practiced eye of a woman who'd learned to spot trouble before it crossed her threshold. "Need a room," June said, setting her bag down careful-like. Maybelle's mouth pursed like she'd bitten into a green persimmon. "Full up." June had passed 2 empty coaches outside. The town wasn't exactly bustling with visitors. "I can pay." "Said we're full." Maybelle's fingers drummed on the counter. "Though I suppose you could sleep by the kitchen fire. Floor's hard, but it's warm enough." June's jaw tightened, but she nodded. A floor by the fire beat a night under the stars, especially with October pushing its cold breath down from the mountains. She reached for her coin purse. $3, Maybelle said. "In advance." $3 for a spot on the floor. "Take it or leave it. Next boarding house is 40 miles east." June counted out the coins, each one hitting the counter with a small sound of defeat. It was near half of what she had left. Maybelle swept them up quick as a crow after corn. "Kitchen's through there." She jerked her chin toward a narrow door. "You can set your things in the corner, but don't touch nothing. Breakfast is at 6 sharp. You miss it, you go hungry." June picked up her bag and started toward the kitchen. Behind her, she heard Maybelle mutter to another woman who'd been pretending to dust the same shelf for the past 5 minutes. "Another one running from something? Mark my words. Trouble follows these lone women like flies after honey." The kitchen was dim, lit only by the dying coals in the massive iron stove. June found a corner away from the foot traffic and set down her bag. The floor was indeed hard, worn smooth by years of boots and spills. She'd slept on worse, though not by much. She was laying out her thin blanket when boot steps rang heavy on the boards. June looked up to see Maybelle in the doorway, arms crossed. "Actually," the older woman said, "I've reconsidered. Can't have you sleeping here after all. Insurance reasons. You understand." June stood slowly. "You took my money, and I'll keep it, for my trouble and for considering it." Maybelle's smile was sharp as a skinning knife. "Best you move along now. It's near dark." "Not my concern." June felt the familiar burn of indignation rise in her chest, the same feeling that had gotten her dismissed from her teaching position back in Cedar Falls, the same feeling that had made her speak up when the school board said she was too outspoken for a woman, too forceful in her opinions. But arguing with Maybelle would only make things worse. These small-town tyrants fed on conflict like pigs at a trough. She bent to gather her blanket, movements careful and controlled. She wouldn't give Maybelle the satisfaction of seeing her hands shake. "She'll stay." The voice came from the shadows near the back door, low and certain as distant thunder. June hadn't noticed anyone else in the kitchen, but now a man stepped into the dim light. He was tall in the way of men who'd grown up with room to stretch, broad-shouldered beneath a thick leather duster that carried the scent of wood smoke and horse sweat. Maybelle's face went through several expressions before settling on indignation. "Calder Reese, this ain't your establishment." "No," he agreed, moving closer. His face was weathered but not old, maybe 35 winters under his belt. Dark hair needed cutting, and his jaw hadn't seen a razor in days. But his eyes were steady as he looked at Maybelle. "But I reckon my money spends as good as anyone's." He pulled out a small leather pouch and set it on the table. The coins inside clinked with promise. $10, he said. "For the lady to have a proper room with a bed." Maybelle's eyes fixed on the pouch like a hawk on a rabbit. "All my rooms are taken." "Then untake one." His voice never rose, but something in it made Maybelle step back. "I know for a fact Charlie Hutchins paid for a room he ain't using while he's out at the mining camp. Move his things to storage. I can't just—" "Or I could have a word with Sheriff Morrison about those watered-down whiskey bottles you sell after midnight." Calder's expression didn't change. "Man's got opinions about folks who cheat honest cowboys out of their drinking money." Maybelle's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. Finally! She snatched up the pouch. "Room 3, upstairs, end of the hall." She turned to June. "You'll be out by week's end." "That's between the lady and your payment schedule." Calder said, "For now, she's got a room." Maybelle stomped out, muttering curses that would have made a mule skinner blush. June stood in the sudden quiet, unsure what to say to this stranger who'd just spent what might be a week's wages on her comfort. "I can't accept that," she said finally. Calder was already turning toward the door. "Didn't ask you to, just evening the scales a bit." "I don't know you." He paused, looking back. In the dim light, she couldn't read his expression, but his voice carried a weight of old tiredness. "No, ma'am, you don't, but I know what it's like to need a soft place to land and find only hard ground." He touched the brim of his hat. "Room 3, lock works, but the window sticks. Give it a shoulder if you need fresh air." Then he was gone, leaving June standing alone with her bag and the echo of unexpected kindness. She climbed the narrow stairs to room 3, finding it small but clean. A narrow bed with a faded quilt, a washstand with a chipped basin, and a window that did indeed stick when she tried to open it. She gave it a shoulder as instructed, and it popped open with a groan. Cool air flowed in, carrying the scent of coming rain and distant pines. Below, she could see Main Street emptying as folks headed home for supper. A lone figure in a leather duster walked toward the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to corrals and stock pens. June watched until the darkness swallowed him up, then closed the window. She sat on the bed, her bed, at least for tonight, and wondered what debt she'd just incurred. In her experience, men who paid for things expected payment in return, one way or another. But Calder Reese hadn't looked at her the way those men did. He'd looked tired, maybe a little sad, like a man who knew what it cost to be alone in a hard world. June knew that look. She saw it every morning in her own reflection. She unpacked her few belongings, 2 dresses, both mended more times than she could count, a handful of books she couldn't bear to leave behind, her teaching certificate, now worthless, a photograph of her parents, gone these past 5 years. The church bell tolled 7 o'clock, somewhere in the distance. A coyote answered with its lonesome cry. June lay back on the bed, still fully dressed, and stared at the water-stained ceiling. Tomorrow she'd look for work. Tomorrow she'd start building something from nothing. Again. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, she had a door she could lock and a bed that didn't hurt her bones. She didn't know Calder Reese, didn't know why he'd chosen to help her, but as sleep finally claimed her, she offered up a prayer of thanks to whatever force had put him in that kitchen at just the right moment. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, washing the dust from Dust Hollow's streets and bringing the false promise of a cleaner dawn. The morning came hard and bright, cutting through the thin curtains like a blade. June woke to the sound of horses and men's voices drifting up from the street. She'd slept in her clothes, a habit born from too many nights in uncertain places. After washing her face in the basin's cold water, she ventured downstairs. The dining room was near empty, just 2 old men hunched over coffee and biscuits. Maybelle was nowhere to be seen, but a colored woman in a flour-dusted apron brought June coffee without being asked. "You're the one, mister, Reese paid for." The woman said, it wasn't a question. "Yes. Name's Ruth. I cook here." She set down a plate of eggs and salt pork. "Mister, Reese is particular about folks being treated fair. You must have caught his eye." June felt heat rise in her cheeks. "It's not like that." Ruth's smile was knowing. "Didn't say it was. Man's got his reasons for everything. Keeps them close, though." She refilled June's coffee. "You looking for work?" "Yes, I'm a teacher. Was a teacher. School board's all men. They won't hire no unmarried woman, especially one who stays in boarding houses." Ruth's voice was matter-of-fact, not unkind. "But there's other work, if you're not too proud." Before June could respond, the door banged open. 3 men entered, trail dust thick on their clothes. They took a table near the window, talking loud about cattle prices and water rights. June kept her eyes on her plate, but she felt their attention shift to her. "Well, well," one of them said, "new face in town." June didn't look up. She'd learned that acknowledging such comments only encouraged more. "Hey there, honey, I'm talking to you." Ruth stepped between them, coffee pot in hand. "Mr. Davies, you need something." Just being friendly, Ruth. But Davies's voice had an edge that suggested anything but friendliness. June finished her eggs quickly, leaving half the pork untouched. She stood to go, but Davies shifted his chair, blocking her path. "Where you rushing off to? We don't bite." "Let her pass." The voice came from the doorway. Calder Reese stood there, hat in hand, his expression calm but watchful. The morning light showed him clearer than the kitchen shadows had strong jaw, dark eyes that missed nothing, hands scarred from work and weather. Davies's smile turned mean. "This your woman, Reese?" "She's a guest in this establishment. That makes her deserving of courtesy." "Since when do you care about courtesy?" Calder stepped aside, creating a clear path for June. "Since always. You just haven't been paying attention." June moved past Davies, careful not to touch him. She paused near Calder, unsure whether to thank him or just leave. He solved her dilemma by speaking first. "I've got work, if you're interested." Davies laughed. "Bet you do." Calder's jaw tightened, but he kept his eyes on June. "I run a horse ranch outside town. Need someone to help with the books and teach the workers' children their letters. Room and board included." June studied his face, looking for the catch. There was always a catch. "Why?" "Because I've got 6 men who can't read their own names and twice that many children growing up the same way." He put on his hat. "Think on it. I'll be at Murphy's General Store until noon if you decide." He left without waiting for an answer. Davies and his companions snickered among themselves, making comments just loud enough to hear. June walked out with her spine straight, Ruth's sympathetic eyes following her. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. June walked the length of Main Street twice, taking measure of Dust Hollow in daylight. It wasn't much a collection of weather-beaten buildings clinging to the edge of civilization like burrs on a saddle blanket. The church needed paint. The school was boarded up, and half the businesses had "for sale" signs gathering dust in their windows. She inquired at the mercantile about work. The owner, a pinch-faced man named Garrett, looked her up and down like she was livestock. "Can you lift 50-pound grain sacks?" "I can learn." "Can you already or can't you?" No." "Then I got no use for you." The story was the same at the telegraph office, the bank, even the saloon where she swallowed her pride and asked about keeping books. Everyone had reasons why she wouldn't suit. Too educated, not strong enough, wrong sort of woman for the work. By 11:30, June stood outside Murphy's General Store. Her options narrowed to one. Through the window, she could see Calder at the counter, pointing at something in a catalog. He'd rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked by old scars. She pushed open the door, setting bells to ringing. Calder glanced up, and something that might have been relief crossed his features before settling back to neutral. Miss Emery. Mr. Reese. She came to stand beside him, noting he smelled of leather and clean hay. About your offer. Still stands. I need to know the terms. All of them. Murphy, the store owner, suddenly found urgent business in the back room. Calder turned to face June fully. $20 a month plus room and board. You'll have your own quarters. There's a cabin sits empty behind the main house. Has its own door, own lock. You teach the children 3 hours each morning. Help with the account books in the afternoon. Sundays are your own. And what else? His brow furrowed. Else? What else do you expect? Men don't usually offer good wages and private cabins without expecting something in return. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something that might have been hurt. I expect you to teach and keep books. Nothing more, nothing less. He picked up his hat from the counter. I've got a ranch to run. Miss Emery, I need educated help and you need work. It's a business arrangement. Why me? You don't know anything about me. I know you came to Dust Hollow alone, which means you're running from something or toward something. Either way, you're brave or desperate. Both qualities I understand. He settled his hat on his head. I know Maybelle tried to cheat you, and you were going to let her rather than make a fuss. That tells me you've learned to pick your battles. And that's enough. It's more than most folks offer when they blow into town. He moved toward the door, then paused. The ranch is 5 miles north. Follow the creek until you see the white fence posts. If you're coming, be there before dark. If not, I wish you luck. June watched him go, her mind churning. $20 a month was good money. Very good. The private cabin answered her immediate concern. But taking charity from a stranger was one thing. Living on his property, dependent on his continued goodwill, was another. She thought of the coins in her purse. Barely enough for another week. Thought of the boarded-up school and the suspicious faces of the townspeople. Thought of sleeping on floors and running out of places to run to. You thinking of taking Calder up on his offer? June turned to find Murphy had returned, his weathered face curious but not unkind. I don't know. Murphy scratched his gray beard. Known Calder Reese going on 10 years. Man's got peculiar ways, but he's honest. Says what he means what he says. People are talking about last night. People always talk. It's what they do when their own lives got nothing happening. He leaned on the counter. You want some free advice? June nodded. Calder Reese is what we call a man of contracts. He believes in fair dealing, keeping your word, paying what you owe. He paid for your room because he saw unfair dealing and couldn't abide it. Now he's offering you work because he needs help and you need work. Simple as that. Nothing's ever that simple. No, Murphy agreed. But Calder is... Man lost his wife 5 years back to fever. Since then, he's been about as romantic as a fence post. All he cares about is his ranch, his horses, and keeping his word. June made her decision. How much for a week's worth of supplies? An hour later, she walked north out of town, following the creek as directed. Her bag was heavier with the dried beans, flour, and coffee she'd bought with nearly the last of her money. If this went badly, at least she wouldn't starve immediately. The land opened up beyond the town, rolling hills covered in sage and bunch grass. The creek gurgled alongside the path, swollen with last night's rain. June had walked maybe 3 miles when she spotted the white fence posts marking a turnoff. The ranch spread before her like something from a picture book. A 2-story main house with a proper porch, several well-maintained outbuildings, and corrals holding some of the finest horses she'd ever seen. Everything spoke of careful attention and hard work. The promised cabin sat 100 yards behind the main house, small but solid. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, and she could see men working with the horses in the far corral. June knocked at the main house door. It opened to reveal a Mexican woman with silver threading through her black hair. You are the teacher. See, mister. Calder said you might come. Her smile was warm. I am Rosa. I keep the house. June Emery. Come, I show you the cabin. Rosa led her across the yard, chattering in a mix of English and Spanish about the ranch, the men, the children who would be June's students. The cabin was better than June had hoped. One room, but clean and dry, with a bed, table, 2 chairs, and a small stove. This was, Rosa started, then stopped. It has been empty some time. It's good to have someone here again. June set down her bag. Through the window, she could see Calder in the corral, working a young horse on a lead line. He moved with patient confidence, never rushing, never forcing. He is a good man, Rosa said, following her gaze. Lonely but good. He said this was business. See, he would say that. Rosa's smile was knowing. You want to meet the children? They are very excited about a real teacher. June unpacked quickly, then followed Rosa to a larger cabin that served as a bunkhouse. The workers' families lived in attached rooms, and soon June was surrounded by a dozen children ranging from 5 to 15, all chattering excitedly. She was organizing them into age groups when Calder appeared in the doorway. He'd washed the trail dust off, but his clothes still carried the honest smell of work. Getting acquainted. Yes, we'll start lessons tomorrow morning. He nodded. Good. When you're done here, I'll show you the account books. Business? June reminded herself. Just business. But when little Maria tugged on her skirt and asked if she'd really teach them to read stories, June felt something ease in her chest. This was work she understood, work that mattered. As the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, June stood on her cabin's small porch. She could hear the men heading in for supper, the horses settling for the night, Rosa calling the children to wash up. Calder emerged from the main house and crossed the yard toward her. You settling in? Yes, thank you. He studied her for a moment, those dark eyes unreadable. I meant what I said. This is your space. Nobody comes here without your say-so. I appreciate that. One more thing. He seemed to choose his words carefully. Sometimes people ask questions, want to know your business. You don't owe them answers, not about where you came from or why you're here. That's yours to keep or share as you see fit. June felt her throat tighten. Thank you. He touched his hat brim and turned to go, then paused. Rosa serves supper at 6. You're welcome at the table, but she can send a plate over if you prefer. June thought of eating alone in her cabin, safe but solitary. Then she thought of Rosa's warm smile and the children's eager faces. I'll come to the table. Something that might have been approval crossed his features. Good. See you at 6. As he walked back to the main house, June allowed herself a small smile. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was a start. The first snow came early that year, dusting the ranch like flour on a baker's table. June had been at the Reese Ranch for 3 weeks, long enough to establish a routine, but not long enough to stop looking over her shoulder when riders approached. She stood before her small class in the converted tack room, watching Miguel struggle with his slate. The boy was 12, smart as a whip when it came to horses, but letters confounded him. Sound it out, June encouraged. C-A-T. Cat. His face lit up. Like the barn cats. Exactly. She moved to where the younger children were practicing their letters. Maria, that's beautiful. Your A is perfect. Through the window, she could see Calder working with a fractious stallion. He moved like water, never meeting the horse's violence with violence. Just steady patience. The other men had gathered to watch, but Calder seemed unaware of his audience. Miss June, Sarah, one of the older girls, raised her hand. Why did you become a teacher? June paused, her chalk hovering over the board. Because I believe everyone deserves to read, to write their own names, to understand the world through books. Pa says women teachers are trouble. Tommy piped up. Says they got too many opinions. The room went quiet. June felt the familiar burn in her chest, the one that had gotten her dismissed from Cedar Falls. But these children weren't the school board. They were just repeating what they'd heard. "What do you think, Tommy?" she asked calmly. The boy squirmed. I don't know. That's honest." June set down her chalk. "Let me tell you something. Having opinions isn't trouble. It's thinking. And thinking is what separates us from the cattle in the field. My ma says you got fired from your last position," Sarah said quietly. "For talking back to men." June's hands stilled on her desk. She'd known the gossip would follow her, even 500 miles from Cedar Falls. She turned to face the children, seeing curiosity rather than judgment in their faces. "I did," she said simply. "The school board wanted me to teach only what they approved. When I disagreed, they said I was too outspoken for a woman." "Were you?" Miguel asked. "I spoke my mind when I thought they were wrong. Some folks call that outspoken. I call it honest." "Mr. Calder speaks his mind," Maria offered. "Nobody calls him trouble." "That's because Mr. Calder is a man," June said gently. "The world has different rules for men and women." "That ain't fair," Tommy said. "No," June agreed. "It's not, but unfair doesn't mean unchangeable. Every one of you learning to read, learning to think, that changes things bit by bit." The door creaked open. Calder stood there, hat in hand, snow dusting his shoulders. The children straightened instinctively. "Pardon the interruption. Mind if I observe?" June's stomach tightened. In Cedar Falls, observations had been the beginning of the end. "Of course not." He took a seat on a too-small bench in the back, folding his long frame carefully. June returned to the lesson, acutely aware of his presence. She was teaching arithmetic when she noticed him leaning forward, watching intently. "Miguel, show Mr. Calder how you solved that problem." The boy proudly displayed his slate, where he'd worked out how many fence posts they'd need for a new corral. Calder studied it, then nodded. "That's good figuring. We'll use that when we start building next week." Miguel beamed. The lesson continued, and June found herself relaxing. Calder didn't interrupt or correct. He just watched, occasionally nodding when a child mastered something difficult. When she dismissed them for lunch, the children scattered like quail. Calder remained seated, looking almost comical on the small bench. "They're learning fast," he said. "They're eager. That makes the difference." June began erasing the board. "Is there something wrong with my teaching?" "Wrong?" He stood, unfolding to his full height. "No. I came to see if the rumors were true." Her hand stilled. "What rumors?" "That June Emery teaches like a man. Direct. No sugarcoating." He moved closer, studying the day's lessons still visible on the board. "The family that sent their kids yesterday, they pulled them out of town school because the teacher only taught the boys arithmetic. Said girls didn't need numbers." "That's foolish. Everyone needs numbers." "Agreed." He picked up a piece of chalk, turning it over in his scarred fingers. "In Cedar Falls, what exactly did you say that got you dismissed?" June's spine stiffened. "Why does it matter?" "Because Davies from town is spreading stories. Says you're a radical. Says you taught inappropriate things." His dark eyes met hers. "I like to know the truth of things." June set down her eraser, memories flooding back. "I told the board that girls should learn the same subjects as boys, that they should read about more than just housekeeping and Bible verses. I suggested adding literature, history beyond dates of battles, maybe even basic science. And they said I was corrupting young minds, putting ideas in girls' heads." She laughed bitterly. "One board member said I was teaching girls to be dissatisfied with their natural place." "What did you say to that?" June met his eyes. "I said their natural place was wherever their minds could take them." Calder was quiet for a long moment. Then, my wife could barely read when we married. Spent the first year teaching her myself, every evening after chores. His voice carried old pain. When the fever took her, she left me a letter. First thing she'd ever written that was just hers. I still have it. June didn't know what to say to that unexpected confession. Teach them what they need to know, Calder said quietly. All of them. I don't care what Davies or anyone else says. He started for the door, then paused. There's a trunk in the attic of the main house, books that that haven't been used in years. You're welcome to them for the children. After he left, June stood in the empty classroom, shaken by the conversation. She'd expected censure, not support, in her experience. Men who heard about her dismissal either saw her as trouble or as prey a woman already marked as improper. That evening at supper, Rosa served beef stew and cornbread. The hands ate quickly, discussing the next day's work. June usually kept quiet during meals, but tonight Hank, the foreman, addressed her directly. Here you're teaching the young'uns to question things. June's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. I'm teaching them to think. Same thing, isn't it? But his weathered face was smiling. My Sarah came home yesterday going on about why the sky's blue. Had to tell her I didn't rightly know. The scattering of light through June caught herself. I could lend you a book that explains it. You could read it together. I'd like that. Hank reached for more cornbread. Never had much schooling myself. Nice to see the children getting better. After supper, June helped Rosa clear dishes despite the older woman's protests. Through the kitchen window, she could see Calder in the barn, lantern light casting long shadows as he tended a sick horse. He doesn't sleep much, Rosa said, following her gaze. Not since his wife died. Rosa nodded. Eleanor, she was gentle, quiet, everything he thinks a woman should be. She gave June a meaningful look. Maybe why he hired you. You're nothing like her. June wasn't sure if that was an insult or compliment. Later, in her cabin, June explored the trunk Calder had mentioned. It was filled with books, novels, poetry, even some scientific texts. At the bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small bundle of letters tied with ribbon. The top one was addressed to my beloved Calder in careful, newly learned script. June wrapped them back quickly, feeling like an intruder. But she took the books, already planning tomorrow's lessons. A knock at her door made her jump. She opened it to find Calder standing in the snow, a heavy coat over his arm. Thought you might need this. Nights are getting colder. June accepted the coat, noting it was well made and barely worn. Thank you, but I can't. It's been hanging unused for years. Waste to let moths have it. He turned to go, then stopped. June, Miss Emery, what you're doing for those children. It matters. Don't let anyone tell you different. Even if I teach them to question things. A rare smile touched his lips. Especially then. Unquestioning folks are how we end up with men like Davies running things. He disappeared into the snowy darkness, leaving June clutching the coat. She held it up, recognizing the careful stitching of a woman's hand, Eleanor's coat. June hung it on the peg by the door. Tomorrow she'd wear it to town. Rumors be damned. Tonight, she had lessons to plan and children to teach. For the first time since leaving Cedar Falls, she felt like she was where she belonged. Through her window, she could see lights still burning in the barn. Calder's silhouette moved past, still tending his horses. Two outsiders, she thought, finding their way in a world that didn't quite know what to do with them. She lit her own lamp and opened one of the books from the trunk. Tomorrow, she'd teach the children about the stars, about how vast the world was beyond Dust Hollow, about all the places their minds could take them, regardless of what anyone said about their natural place. The wind howled outside, but her little cabin was warm. For tonight, that was enough. The talk started small, like all poisonous things do. Whispers at the general store when June came for supplies. Glances held too long at church, where she sat with Rosa and the ranch families while Calder stood in the back with the other unmarried men. Living in sin, Mrs. Davies muttered to her circle after Sunday service, loud enough to carry, "No decent woman lives on a man's property without a ring on her finger." June kept her eyes forward, Eleanor's coat warm around her shoulders. Let them talk, she thought, but the words burrowed under her skin like splinters. It was the coat that did it. Really, the women recognized it, remembered Eleanor wearing it to church, to town gatherings. Seeing it on June was like watching her walk in a dead woman's shoes. The comparison was inevitable, and June came up wanting. Eleanor would never have taken employment like that, Constance Murphy said at the church social, her voice carrying over the coffee and cake. She knew a woman's place. Perhaps Eleanor never needed employment, June replied quietly, setting down her cup. We don't all have the luxury of choosing our place. The conversation died around her. Women turned away, finding urgent business elsewhere. Only Ruth from the boarding house offered a sympathetic glance before she too was pulled away by propriety's demands. Calder noticed. Of course, he had a way of seeing everything while appearing to look at nothing. That evening, he found June in the barn, checking on a mare due to foal soon. Town giving you trouble. June ran her hand along the mare's swollen sides. No more than expected. I could speak to them. That would make it worse. She met his eyes. You know that. He leaned against the stall door, a rare frown creasing his brow. I've put you in a difficult position. I put myself here. You just offered honest work. People don't see it that way. People rarely see things as they are. June stepped out of the stall. I've been talked about before. I survived it. This is different. This is my fault. Something in his voice made her pause. He looked tired. She realized, more tired than usual. Has someone said something to you? He laughed, short and humorless. Davies suggested I was keeping you for improper purposes. I corrected his assumption. June noticed his knuckles were scraped. How forcefully? Forcefully enough. He flexed his hand. But it won't stop the talk. Maybe you should take rooms in town. I could arrange. No. The word came out sharper than intended. I won't be driven off by gossip. The children need consistency. They're just starting to trust me. The children aren't worth your reputation. My reputation was ruined the day I spoke up in Cedar Falls. At least here, I'm doing something worthwhile. They stood in the barn's quiet, hay dust floating in the lantern light. Outside, one of the hands was singing a Mexican song, low and mournful. There's a dance next Saturday, Calder said suddenly. In town, if we went together, publicly, it might quiet some talk. June's heart did an odd skip. Or it might confirm their suspicions. At least they'd see we're not hiding anything. Aren't we? The question slipped out before she could stop it. His eyes searched hers. What do you mean? June looked away, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. Nothing. Yes, the dance. That's practical. Practical, he repeated, something unreadable in his voice. Saturday, then. He left her standing in the barn, her hands trembling slightly. She told herself it was the cold. The week passed slowly. The children sensed something was wrong, the way children always do. They were extra attentive in lessons, as if good behavior could fix whatever troubled their teacher. On Thursday, June was walking back from the henhouse when she saw riders approaching. Her stomach dropped when she recognized Davies and two other men from town. She thought about retreating to her cabin, but that would look like fear. Calder emerged from the main house before they'd even dismounted. Hank and two other hands appeared from the barn, casual-like, but June noticed they all wore their guns. Gentlemen, Calder said, his voice carrying that particular stillness that meant trouble. Something I can help you with? We've come to talk sense, Davies said, not bothering to dismount. About your situation. My situation is my business, not when it reflects on the whole town. Davies's pig eyes found June. We've got standards in Dust Hollow. Since when? Calder's voice could have frosted glass. Was it when you watered down whiskey, or when you cheated Tom Henderson at cards? Davies's face flushed. This ain't about me. It's about protecting decent women from bad influences. The only bad influence I see is sitting on a horse in my yard, uninvited. One of the other men, younger and clearly nervous, spoke up. We just think the lady should find other accommodations, for appearance's sake. You know what I think? Calder stepped off the porch, moving with that dangerous grace June had seen when he worked difficult horses. I think you're worried. Here's a woman who speaks her mind, teaches children to think, doesn't bow and scrape. That scares you. Now see here. No, you see, Calder's hand rested casual on his gun belt. Miss Emery is my employee. She lives where I say she lives, teaches what I say she teaches. You got a problem with that. You take it up with me. But you come near her, you threaten her, you so much as speak harsh to her in town, and we'll have more than words. The silence stretched taut as fence wire. Finally. Davies wheeled his horse around. You're making a mistake. Reese, this won't end well. After they left, June found she was shaking. Not from fear, exactly, but from something else. No one had ever defended her like that. In Cedar Falls, she'd stood alone before the board, alone before the town's judgment. You all right? Calder hadn't moved from his spot. Yes, thank you. Don't thank me for doing what's right. He turned to go back inside, then paused. June. She startled. He rarely used her given name. Wear something you can dance in Saturday. We might as well give them a show. Saturday came crisp and clear. June stood before her small mirror, wearing her best dress blue wool that brought out her eyes. She'd nearly talked herself out of going 3 times, but Rosa had appeared with a hair comb that had been Eleanor's. She would want it used, Rosa said firmly, pinning June's hair up. She was not the saint they make her. She had fire too, just quieter. What do you mean? Rosa smiled. Why do you think Signor Calder taught her to read? She asked. She insisted. Gentle ways, but iron underneath. A knock interrupted them. Calder stood at the door, dressed in his best, a black suit that made him look both handsome and slightly uncomfortable. His eyes traveled over June, and something warm flickered there before he banked it. Ready? The ride to town was quiet. June sat beside him in the wagon, aware of every inch between them. The stars were just coming out, winter constellations she'd been teaching the children to identify. The dance hall was already crowded when they arrived. Conversation stuttered and stopped as they entered, then resumed at a higher pitch. June lifted her chin and smiled as if she didn't notice. Courage, Calder murmured, his hand at her elbow. They're more afraid of you than you are of them. I'm not afraid. I know. There was approval in his voice. That's what terrifies them. They danced the first dance together, a simple reel that required little touching. But even that casual contact, his hand on hers, guiding her through the turns, sent warmth through June's entire body. He danced like he did everything else, with quiet competence and surprising grace. Where did you learn to dance? She asked as they waited for the next song. My mother insisted, said no son of hers would embarrass a lady on a dance floor. His lips quirked. Haven't had much cause to use it lately. They were joined by others for the next dance ranch families who nodded politely to June, ignoring the town folks' disapproval. She danced with Hank, with Miguel's father, even with young Tommy, who solemnly asked if she'd honor him with a turn. But it was the waltz that changed everything. The musician struck up a slow melody, and Calder appeared at her elbow. May I? June knew she should refuse. The waltz was still considered somewhat scandalous, too intimate for unmarried couples in strict company. But his hand was extended, his dark eyes steady on hers. She took his hand. They moved together as if they'd done this 100 times. His hand at her waist was properly placed but warm through the fabric. She could smell his soap, the leather of his good boots, something uniquely him underneath. "People are staring," she murmured. "Let them." He guided her through a turn. "You know what I see when I look at them, Fear? They're afraid of change, of anyone who doesn't fit their narrow world. And you're not—" His hand tightened slightly on hers. After Eleanor died, I wanted everything to stay exactly the same. Thought if nothing changed, it wouldn't hurt so much." "What changed your mind?" "You did." The words were quiet, meant only for her. "Watching you with the children, seeing you refuse to apologize for who you are. It reminded me there's more to life than just enduring." June's breath caught. Around them, couples swirled, but she was aware only of him, of the weight of his confession. "Calder." "I know," he said quickly. "I know what we agreed. Business arrangement. I just wanted you to understand. The talk doesn't matter. Let them whisper. We know the truth." The music ended. They stepped apart. The space between them suddenly cold. June excused herself, needing air, needing to think. She stood on the hall's back porch, breath misting in the night air. She'd felt it, dancing, the pull between them, stronger than mere attraction. It was understanding, recognition of like calling to like, two people who didn't quite fit, finding they fit together. Planning your escape. June turned to find Ruth with 2 cups of punch. Just needed air. Ruth handed her a cup. "He's a good man. Calder Reese." "I know." "Do you?" Ruth sipped her punch. "Most men would have betted you by now, begging your pardon for plain speaking. Power over a woman in his house. They'd use it, but he won't even court you proper without making sure you know you're free to leave any time." June's cheeks burned. "We're not courting. Honey, that man looks at you like you hung the moon, and you look back the same way when you think no one's watching." Ruth patted her arm. "Don't let fear of talk keep you from something real. Talk fades. Regret doesn't." When June returned to the hall, she found Calder cornered by Davies and his cronies. She couldn't hear the words, but Calder's stance spoke of controlled anger. Without thinking, she crossed to them, slipping her hand through Calder's arm. "There you are. You promised me another dance." Davies's face went purple. "We were having a conversation." "Were you?" June smiled sweetly. "How nice. But the music's starting." She drew Calder away, feeling the tension in his arm. They took position for another reel, his jaw still tight with anger. "What did they say?" "Nothing worth repeating." He took her hand as the music began. "Thank you. I was about to do something foolish." "We can't have that. Who would dance with me then?" He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face. Any man with sense. They danced until the musicians played the last waltz. This time, he held her a fraction closer, and she let him. Tomorrow would bring more gossip, more judgment. But tonight, in his arms, with his voice low in her ear pointing out constellations through the window, June felt something she hadn't felt in years. Home. Not the building or the place, but this being known, being valued not despite who she was, but because of it. She'd face the whispers tomorrow. Tonight, she danced with a man who saw her clearly and didn't look away. When he drove her home under a sky brilliant with stars, neither spoke of what was building between them, but his hand found hers on the wagon seat, and she didn't pull away. "No regrets?" he asked as they reached the ranch. "No," June said firmly. "Let them talk. Mouths have never kept me warm in winter." He laughed, startled. "You sound like me." "Maybe that's not a bad thing." He helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering on her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Good night, June." "Good night, Calder." She walked to her cabin, knowing he watched until she was safely inside. Through her window, she saw him lead the horses to the barn, taking care of them before himself, as always. Tomorrow would come with its challenges, but tonight had shown her something precious. She wasn't alone anymore. Whatever battles came, she'd face them with someone beside her who understood the cost of being different, the price of integrity. The coat on its peg caught the lamplight. Eleanor's coat, now hers. Perhaps Rosa was right. Perhaps the quiet woman would understand two women who'd found their way to the same man, both refusing to be less than they were. June prepared for bed, humming the melody of the last waltz. Outside, snow began to fall, soft as whispered promises. The morning Calder didn't return started like any other. He'd left before dawn, taking 2 pack horses loaded with supplies for Fort Benton's cavalry unit. A 3-day journey there and back, weather permitting. Don't let the children slack on their arithmetic, he'd told June at supper the night before. Miguel's finally understanding fractions. She'd smiled at his concern. In the weeks since the dance, he'd taken to checking on the children's progress each evening, sometimes sitting in on lessons. The students loved showing off for him. "I'll keep them sharp," she promised. He'd lingered at the door, something unspoken in his eyes. "June." "Be safe," she said quickly, not ready for whatever he might say. "The weather's turning." 3 days passed, then 4. On the 5th morning, Hank knocked on her cabin door, worry etched deep in his weathered face. "He should have been back yesterday. Latest." June kept her voice steady. The snow might have slowed him. "Maybe." Hank didn't look convinced. "I'm riding out to look. Can you manage things here?" Of course. But managing things and managing her fear were different matters. She taught lessons, helped Rosa with meals, checked the ledgers, all while listening for hoofbeats that didn't come. By the 6th day, the ranch hands were taking shifts riding the trail toward Fort Benton. They returned with nothing but worry and frozen fingers. That's when the rumors reached them. A trader passing through mentioned seeing an overturned wagon near Blackstone Pass. Another spoke of raiders hitting supply trains. A third swore he'd seen Calder in the company of a woman from his past, heading east toward the rail lines. Lies. Rosa spat when June reluctantly shared the gossip. Senor Calder would never abandon his responsibilities. But doubt crept in like cold through door cracks. June knew so little about his life before the ranch, before Eleanor. What if there were debts to settle? Promises that pulled him away. On the 7th day, June made her decision. She'd finished morning lessons when she announced to Hank, "I'm going to look for him." "Miss June, that's foolish. The pass is dangerous." "Then that's where he needs help." She was already moving toward the barn. "I'll take Buttercup. She's steady in snow." "You don't even know the trail." "North to Willow Creek. Follow it to the granite markers. Bear east at the Split Rock." She'd listened to Calder describe it enough times. "I can find it." Hank tried more arguments, but June's mind was set. She packed light blankets, food, the rifle Calder had taught her to use. Rosa pressed a flask of whiskey into her hands. "For medicine," the older woman said, crossing herself. "Bring him home." June rode out as snow began falling, thick and steady. The first hours were easy enough, following the clear trail along the creek, but as she climbed higher, the wind picked up, driving snow sideways. By nightfall, she'd reached the granite markers but could go no further safely. She sheltered in a small cave, building a careful fire, trying not to think about wolves or worse. The night was long and cold, filled with windsong and worry. Dawn came gray and bitter. June forced down some hardtack and pressed on. The Split Rock was buried in snow, but she found it by memory of Calder's description. East from there, toward the pass. She smelled the smoke before she saw anything. Wood smoke, but also the acrid scent of burned supplies. Buttercup whinnied nervously as they rounded a bend. The wagon lay on its side, half buried in snow. Crates were scattered, some burned, others broken open. No horses, no Calder. June's heart hammered as she dismounted, calling his name. The wind threw it back at her, mocking. She searched the wreckage, finding blood frozen on the wagon seat. Too much blood. "Calder," her voice cracked. "Calder, answer me." "A sound, maybe wind, maybe something else." She scrambled through the snow, following instinct more than anything. Behind a cluster of rocks, she found a small shelter made of canvas and branches, and inside, he was pale as the snow around him, his coat dark with dried blood, but his chest rose and fell, and when she touched his face, his eyes fluttered open. "June!" His voice was barely a whisper. "You shouldn't. Dangerous." "Hush." She was already examining his injuries. A deep gash along his ribs, possibly from the wagon overturning. His left leg bent at an angle that made her stomach turn. How he'd managed to drag himself to shelter, she couldn't imagine. "Raiders," he mumbled. "Took the horses, left me for dead." "Well, they were wrong." She pulled out the whiskey, tore strips from her petticoat for bandages. "I'm taking you home." "Can't ride, legs broken." "Then I'll make a travois. I've seen the hands do it for injured cattle." His hand caught hers, surprisingly strong. "June, listen, leave me. Get back safe." "Not while I'm breathing." She threw his own words back at him, saw recognition flicker in his pain-dulled eyes. "You don't get to save me, then give up when it's your turn to be saved." It took hours to fashion the travois from the wagon remains and branches. Longer still to get Calder onto it, both of them gasping from the effort. He passed out twice, which was a mercy. Buttercup, bless her steady heart, accepted the strange burden. June led her on foot, picking the smoothest path possible. Every bump brought groans from Calder, cutting through her like knives. Night was falling again when she realized they wouldn't make it back. The snow was getting worse, and Calder's fevered rambling told her infection was setting in. She found another shelter, a half-cave formed by fallen rocks, and made the hardest decision of her life. She unhitched the travois, dragged Calder inside, then led Buttercup back to the trail. "Go home," she told the mare, slapping her rump. "Go get help." Buttercup hesitated, then trotted off into the snow. June watched until she disappeared, then returned to Calder. The night was endless. She kept the fire going, melted snow for water, forced drops between his cracked lips. He burned with fever, muttering about Eleanor, about June, about promises unkept. "Shouldn't have left," he said during one lucid moment. "Storm coming. I knew better." "Why did you?" His eyes found hers, suddenly clear. "Wanted to be back for your birthday. Rosa said it was tomorrow. Got you something." June's throat closed. She hadn't told anyone about her birthday, had planned to let it pass unmarked. "Foolish man," she whispered. "I don't need presents." "Wanted you to have something yours, not Eleanor's, yours." He fumbled at his coat pocket with his good hand. "Can't reach?" She found it a small wrapped package. Inside was a silver hair comb decorated with tiny stars. "Saw you teaching about constellations," he mumbled. "Thought suits you better than borrowed things." June's eyes burned. She smoothed his hair back, humming softly the same waltz they danced to. He quieted, his breathing evening out. Dawn brought the sound of horses. Many horses. June burst from the shelter to see Hank leading a rescue party, Buttercup trotting proudly alongside. "Smart horse," Hank said, dismounting quickly. "Let us right to you." They got Calder onto a proper stretcher, June hovering as the men worked. Someone wrapped her in blankets, pressed hot coffee into her hands. She didn't remember the ride back, only Rosa's tears and the doctor arriving from town. The next days blurred together. Calder's fever raged while the doctor set his leg, cleaned his wounds. The whole ranch held its breath. June refused to leave his room, sleeping in a chair beside his bed. He's asking for you, Rosa said on the fourth morning. June flew to his side. His eyes were clear, truly clear, for the first time since she'd found him. You came for me, he said wonderingly. Of course I did. In a blizzard, alone, his hand found hers. Foolish woman. Foolish man, she countered. Risking your life for a birthday present. Worth it to see you wear something that was never hers. His thumb traced circles on her palm. June, when I was out there, all I could think. I wasted so much time. Being proper, being careful. Calder. No, let me say it. I love you. Not as a memory of Eleanor. Not as convenience. You. Your strength. Your stubbornness. The way you look at the world like it's a problem to be solved. His grip tightened. If I hadn't been so set on keeping distance, I'd have taken someone with me. Almost lost the chance to tell you. June's vision blurred. You, impossible man. I rode through a blizzard for you. Did you think that was just employee loyalty? He laughed, then winced. Hoped it was more. It was... is... She leaned down, pressing her forehead to his. I love you too. Have for weeks, maybe months, fighting it because I thought you still belonged to her. I belong to the past, he corrected. You brought me back to the living. She kissed him then, soft and careful of his injuries. When she pulled back, he was smiling. Marry me, he said. Not for propriety, not for the talk, because I want to wake up every morning knowing you're mine and I'm yours. Yes, no hesitation, no doubt. Though you realize I'll still be too outspoken for a proper wife. I'm counting on it. He pulled her down for another kiss. Who else would ride through a blizzard to save my stubborn hide? Outside the window, snow fell soft and peaceful. Inside. June curled carefully beside him on the bed. Finally where she belonged. Not on the floor, not in borrowed spaces, but home. When Rosa found them hours later. June wearing the star comb in her hair, and Calder's arm protective around her. The older woman smiled and quietly closed the door. Some things were worth the wait, some loves worth the journey through storms. The fever took him again in the deepest part of the night. June woke to his thrashing, the bandages across his ribs seeping fresh red. His skin burned against her palm when she checked his forehead. Eleanor, he muttered, eyes seeing something beyond the room. Eleanor, I'm sorry. Should have been there. June's heart clenched, but she pushed aside the sting. This wasn't about her. She wrung out cool cloths, bathed his face and neck, whispered soothing words that didn't seem to reach him. Failed you, he continued, lost in memory. The fever, couldn't stop it. Rosa appeared with fresh water and clean bandages. Together they worked in practiced silence, changing his dressings, forcing willow bark tea between his lips. The older woman's face was grave. The wound. It goes bad, Rosa said quietly. We need the doctor again. I'll go. June was already reaching for her boots. In this storm, no senora. I send Miguel. But June couldn't sit still. She paced the room, watching Calder fight battles only he could see. Sometimes he called for Eleanor, sometimes for his mother. Once, heartbreakingly clear, he said, Don't let June sleep on the floor. She deserves better. By dawn, his fever had climbed higher. The doctor arrived looking haggard, having fought through snowdrifts to reach them. He examined Calder with gentle hands and a deepening frown. The infection spread, he said finally. I need to open the wound, clean it proper. It'll be painful. Do it, June said. He should be held down. In his state, he might... I'll hold him. The next hour was the longest of June's life. She cradled Calder's head in her lap while the doctor worked, feeling every cut like it was her own flesh. Calder screamed, fought, called out names of people long dead. But June held on. whispering promises she wasn't sure he could hear. "You come back to me," she said fiercely. "You hear me? Calder Reese. You don't get to propose marriage, then leave me to face this town alone." Whether it was her words or the doctor's skill, something shifted. Calder's breathing eased. The wild heat began to break, leaving him drenched but quiet. "He'll live," the doctor said, exhausted. "But he's weak. No visitors except family." "I am family," June said, daring him to argue. He didn't. The next days blurred together. June barely left the room, reading to Calder from the books he'd given her, talking about the children's lessons, planning improvements for the school. Sometimes he seemed to hear her. Sometimes he slept like the dead. It was little Sarah who broke through. The children had been beside themselves with worry, and June finally allowed them to stand at the doorway, just to see their mister. Calder was still there. "Is he going to die like my ma did?" Sarah asked, her small voice carrying all the weight of a child who'd lost too much. Calder's eyes opened. "Not planning on it," he rasped. The children gasped. June felt tears start as Calder managed a weak smile for them. "Been sleeping too long," he said. "How's your arithmetic?" That was the turning point. Each day brought small improvements. He stayed awake longer, took broth, then solid food. His color returned slowly, though he was still weak as a newborn colt. But as his body healed, June noticed a distance growing. He was unfailingly polite, thanking her for her care. But the warmth from before his injury seemed dimmed. When she tried to bring up his proposal, he changed the subject. "He needs time," Rosa counseled. "Men, they feel shame when weak. He will remember his heart soon." June wasn't so sure. She'd moved back to her cabin once he was out of danger, visiting only during proper hours. The easy intimacy of those first days was gone, replaced by careful courtesy. A week into his recovery, she found him trying to stand, sweat beading his forehead from the effort. His leg, still splinted, buckled immediately. "What are you doing?" She rushed to catch him. "Need to check the horses. Hank can't manage everything." "Hank is managing fine. You need to heal." "I need to be useful." His voice was bitter. "Not lying here like an invalid while you—" He stopped abruptly. "While I what?" He looked away. "You came for me, risked everything, and for what, a broken man who can't even stand on his own feet." Understanding dawned. "Calder Reese, you look at me." He did, reluctantly. "I didn't ride through a blizzard for a strong back and a steady gun hand. I rode through it for you, broken leg and all. You deserve better than a man who taught me to shoot straight, who defended my reputation against the whole town, who sees me as I am and doesn't flinch." June's temper flared. "Don't you dare decide what I deserve." "June, no, you proposed to me. Was that the fever talking? Or did you mean it?" His eyes searched hers. "I meant it, but that was before you had to see me like this. Weak, useless. I saw you survive what would have killed most men. I saw you fight to come back. That's not weakness." She took his face in her hands. "Do you love me?" "More than my life." "Then stop trying to protect me from that love." He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. When I woke up and realized what you'd done, what you'd risked, I couldn't bear the thought of trapping you with half a man." "You impossible fool." She was crying and laughing at once. "You're worth 10 whole men on your worst day." They stayed like that until a knock interrupted. Tommy peered around the door. "Miss June, there's men from town here. They don't look friendly." June helped Calder back to bed, then went to face whatever new trouble had arrived. In the main room, she found Davies and 3 others, including Mayor Hutchins himself. "Gentlemen," she said coolly, "Mr. Reese is recovering and can't receive visitors." "We're not here for Reese," Davies said, his smile unpleasant. "We're here about you." "Me?" Mayor Hutchins cleared his throat. "There have been complaints about the influence you're having on the children, teaching them inappropriate things. Such as telling girls they can be more than wives and mothers, teaching them subjects reserved for boys, filling their heads with ideas above their station." June felt the familiar burn of indignation. "I'm teaching them to read, write, and think. If that threatens you—" "What threatens us?" Davies interrupted. "Is a woman of loose morals corrupting our youth." "Loose morals? Living with a man unmarried, riding off alone, spending nights unchaperoned with him." Davies's pig eyes glinted. "We can't have such a woman teaching innocent children." "I see." June's voice was deadly quiet. "And what do you propose?" "You leave today. We'll overlook your indiscretions if you go quietly." "And if I refuse?" Mayor Hutchins shifted uncomfortably. "Then we'll have to take formal action. Charges of moral turpitude. Public censure. It would be unpleasant." June was forming a response when movement caught her eye. Calder stood in the doorway, leaning heavily on a makeshift crutch, his face pale but determined. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying despite his weakness, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Reese, you should be in bed. I should be defending my fiancé's honor." He moved carefully into the room. "Miss Emery and I are engaged, have been since before my injury. We were waiting to announce it properly, but your visit forces our hand." Davies's face flushed. "Engaged or not, her behavior saved my life. She risked everything to find me when your good Christian townspeople were spreading rumors I'd run off." Calder's voice could have cut glass. "She's shown more courage and decency than the lot of you combined. Now see here." "No, you see." Calder straightened as much as his injuries allowed. "June Emery will continue teaching because she's the best teacher these children have ever had. She'll continue living on this ranch because it's her home. And if any of you speak one word against her character, you'll answer to me." "You can barely stand," Davies sneered. "Today, maybe, but I'm healing. Are you?" Calder smiled. "And it wasn't pleasant, because I have a long memory. Davies, I remember every slight, every insult you've thrown at her. When I'm back on my feet, we can discuss them in detail." The threat hung in the air. June moved to Calder's side, taking his arm as if to support him, though she knew he'd stand until he dropped rather than show weakness before these men. "Furthermore," Calder continued, "we'll be married within the month. I trust that addresses your concerns about propriety." Mayor Hutchins tugged at his collar. "I suppose, if you're to be married—" "We are. You're all invited to the wedding. I'm sure you'll want to witness our blessed union." His tone suggested they'd better attend if they knew what was good for them. The men filed out, Davies casting dark looks back. When they were gone, Calder sagged against June. "Back to bed," she ordered, "before you fall down." "Had to," he gasped as she helped him walk. "Couldn't let them. Couldn't." "My hero," she said, meaning it, "defending my honor on one good leg. Would do it on none if I had to." He collapsed onto the bed, breathing hard. "June, I meant it. About the marriage. Not just to shut them up. I know. Within the month might have been optimistic. I can barely walk. Then we'll have the ceremony here. Rosa can make a feast. The children can decorate." She smoothed his hair back. "Unless you want to wait until you can stand at the altar, I've waited long enough." He caught her hand. "But June, be sure, once you're my wife, the talk will never fully stop. You'll always be the woman who lived here unmarried, who rode out alone, who speaks her mind." "Good," June said firmly. "Let them remember. Let them know exactly who Calder Reese chose to marry. Not despite those things, but because of them." He pulled her down for a kiss. "That's my girl." Always was, she said against his lips. Just took you a while to notice. Outside, snow began falling again, but inside was warm and safe. June curled beside him, careful of his injuries, and felt the last of the distance melt away. They'd both fought so hard to reach this moment through blizzards and fevers, gossip and gunshot wounds. The town could talk all it wanted. They'd earned their happiness, paid for it in blood and courage. I love you, Calder murmured, already drifting toward sleep. I love you too, June replied, broken bones and all. His laugh followed her into dreams, warm as summer sunshine. The wedding came and went like a spring storm sudden, intense, and leaving everything changed in its wake. They'd married in the main room of the ranch house, Calder standing with the help of a cane, June wearing a simple blue dress that Rosa had embroidered with silver stars to match her comb. Half the town had attended, some from genuine goodwill, others from curiosity. Davies had sat in the back, face sour as week-old milk, but he'd come. June took that as a small victory. And now, 3 weeks later, the ranch had settled into new rhythms. June had moved into the main house, taking over Eleanor's former sewing room as her study. She'd worried about ghosts, but Calder had been the one to suggest it. Make it yours, he'd said simply. The past has had its time. Spring was fighting its way through winter's grip when the trouble started. June first noticed when Miguel didn't come to lessons, then Sarah, then half her usual students. Those who came seemed nervous, glancing at the door like they expected someone to burst through. What's wrong? She asked Tommy directly. The boy squirmed, but finally answered, Pa says maybe we shouldn't come no more. Says Mr. Davies is talking about starting a proper school in town, with a proper teacher. I see. June kept her voice level. And what do you think? I think Mr. Davies is full of beans, Tommy said loyally. But Pa owes him money from the store. Can't afford to cross him. That evening, June found Calder in his study, leg propped up, going through accounts. He'd healed well but still tired easily, though he'd never admit it. We have a problem, she said, and explained about the children. His jaw tightened. Davies should have dealt with him months ago. Violence won't solve this. No, but it'd feel good. He sighed, rubbing his face. What do you want to do? Fight back, but cleverly. June paced the room. What if we made the school official got proper certification from the territorial board? That's a thought, but it takes time, and Davies moves fast when he smells blood. A knock interrupted them. Rosa entered, looking troubled. Senor, there is a man to see you, from the bank. June's stomach dropped. She followed Calder to the main room, where a thin man in a city suit waited, briefcase in hand. Mr. Reese, Mrs. Reese. He didn't meet their eyes. I'm afraid I have unfortunate news. The bank is calling in your loan. What loan? Calder's voice was dangerously quiet. The one against the ranch. $3,000, due in full within 30 days. That loan isn't due for 2 more years. The terms state it can be called early if the bank deems the investment at risk. The man shuffled papers. Recent concerns about the management of the property have prompted a review. Davies. June didn't make it a question. The banker flushed. I couldn't say, but the board feels that with your recent injury and domestic changes, perhaps the ranch isn't as stable as previously thought. Calder stood carefully, and June saw the banker step back, even weakened. Her husband was formidable when angry. Get out, Calder said softly. Tell Davies, tell the board they'll have their money. Every cent. After the banker fled, Calder sank into a chair. June knelt beside him, mind racing. $3,000 in 30 days. Might as well be 30,000. His hands clenched. We're cash poor until the horses sell in fall. Davies knows that. There has to be something we can do. Sell land or stock. Either way, the ranch bleeds. He looked older suddenly, worn. Maybe it's time. Maybe. Don't. June gripped his hands. Don't you dare give up. Not the man who survived a blizzard. Not the man who stood up to them on one leg. That was different. This is money. June, cold, hard facts. Then we changed the facts. She stood, pacing. The children stopped coming because their parents owe Davies money. What if they didn't? What are you thinking? But June was already moving, grabbing her shawl. I need to go to town. Talk to people. June. Trust me. She kissed him quickly. And don't shoot anyone while I'm gone. She rode hard to town, finding Ruth at the boarding house first. The older woman listened to June's idea with growing interest. It might work, Ruth said slowly. But you'd need someone with money, real money. I know. June smiled grimly. That's my next stop. She found Judge Morrison at his home, the finest house in Dust Hollow. He received her in his study, curious but courteous. Mrs. Reese, to what do I owe the pleasure? June didn't waste time on pleasantries. You know Davies is trying to destroy my husband. The judge's bushy eyebrows rose. That's a strong accusation. Is it false? He was quiet a moment. No, but Davies owns half the town's dead. What he's doing isn't illegal. But is it right? June leaned forward. Judge, you've known Calder for years. You know what kind of man he is, and you know what Davies is. I do, but knowing and acting are different things. What if they weren't? June outlined her plan quickly. Buy the debts, all of them. Give people a chance to pay fair terms instead of under Davies's thumb. That would take considerable capital. You have considerable capital. You also have grandchildren who can barely read because the town school closed 2 years ago. June met his eyes. Help us, and they'll have a real education. Let Davies win, and they'll have nothing. The judge was quiet so long June thought she'd failed. Then, my late wife was a teacher. Did you know that before we married? He smiled at the memory. She'd have liked you, Mrs. Reese, very well. I'll buy the debts, fair terms, reasonable interest. June nearly cried with relief. Thank you so much. I'm not finished. There's a condition. Her heart sank. What condition? The school becomes official. Proper certification, territorial oversight. And you add evening classes for adults who want to learn. His eyes twinkled. My Mary always said education shouldn't stop with childhood. Yes to all of it. She rode home feeling like she could fly, but her elation dimmed when she found the ranch in uproar. Several horses were gone from the corral, and Hank was organizing riders. What happened? Rustlers, Hank spat. Took 6 of our best breeding mares, including Buttercup. June's heart clenched. Buttercup, who'd saved their lives. When? This afternoon, while most of us were in the far pasture. She found Calder strapping on his gun belt, face set in hard lines. Don't try to stop me, he said without looking up. I wouldn't dream of it. She checked her own rifle. But you're not going alone. June. Partners. Remember in everything. They rode out with Hank and 3 others, following tracks in the fading light. The trail led north, toward rough country where law didn't reach. Could be holed up at Skeleton Ridge, Hank suggested. Rustlers use those caves sometimes. They approached carefully as full dark settled. Sure enough, firelight flickered from one of the caves. June could hear horses nickering their horses. 3 men, looks like, Hank whispered after scouting. Armed, but not expecting trouble. June stays here, Calder said firmly. June does not. She checked her rifle. I can shoot. You taught me. They argued in whispers until Hank interrupted. Begging pardon, but they're passing a bottle. Might be our best chance. In the end, June positioned herself above the cave with her rifle while the men approached from below. The plan was simple: demand surrender, take the horses, let the law sort out the rest. But plans rarely survive first contact. One of the rustlers spotted them early, shouting a warning. Gunfire erupted, echoing off canyon walls. June saw one rustler trying to flank Calder, who was pinned down behind inadequate cover. She didn't think, just sighted and fired. The man's gun spun away as he clutched his shoulder, screaming. The fight was brief but vicious. When the smoke cleared, 2 rustlers were wounded. One fled into the darkness. The horses were safe, including Buttercup, who whinnied recognition when June approached. "You shot him," Calder said, looking at June with something like awe. Clean through the shoulder. "You taught me well." Her hands were shaking now, reaction setting in. "Is everyone all right?" "Thanks to you," Hank grinned. "That was some shooting. Mrs. Reese." They tied up the wounded rustlers, rounded up the horses, and started home. Calder rode beside June, reaching over occasionally to touch her hand. "Partners," he said quietly. "Though I'd prefer partners who don't terrify me by putting themselves in danger." "Same to you, husband." They were almost home when one of the rustlers, the younger one June had shot, started talking, maybe from pain, maybe from fear, but words poured out. "Davies paid us," he gasped. "Said take the best horses, said make it look random." Calder's face went stone hard. "You willing to swear to that before the judge?" "If it keeps me from hanging, I'll swear to anything true." June and Calder exchanged looks. Between the judge's intervention and this testimony, they had Davies cornered. "Looks like the tide's turning," she said softly. "Thanks to my warrior wife." He smiled, tired but genuine. "Remind me never to make you angry." "Oh, husband," June said sweetly. "You've seen me angry. This was just irritated." Hank laughed. "Lord help us all if she ever gets truly riled." They reached the ranch as dawn broke, exhausted but victorious. Rosa fussed over them while they secured the prisoners to await the sheriff. The story would spread: June Reese shooting rustlers, defending what was theirs. "Let them talk about that," June said as Calder helped her down from her horse. "Let them say Calder Reese's wife is dangerous when crossed." They'd be right. He pulled her close, uncaring of who might see. "My brilliant, brave, terrifying wife." "Your wife who just saved our ranch," she grinned. "Though I'll expect proper appreciation later." "Counting on it." As they walked inside together, June felt the last pieces clicking into place. They'd beaten Davies at his own game, saved their horses, proved their partnership in blood and courage. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, making the school official, dealing with Davies's inevitable retaliation, building their life together. But tonight, they were home. They were safe, and they were together. The sunrise painted the ranch in gold and rose, and June thought she'd never seen anything more beautiful. Her husband, her home, her purpose all fought for, all earned. She was June Reese now, teacher, rancher's wife, defender of what was hers. Let the whole territory know it. She'd carved out her place in this hard land, and she'd defend it with words or bullets, whatever it took. The floor beneath her feet was solid, bought with courage and determination. She'd never sleep on anyone's floor again. This was home, and she was exactly where she belonged. The morning light filtered through the bedroom curtains, finding Calder already awake. 7 days had passed since the rustlers, since Davies's scheme had unraveled. 7 days of relative peace, which made him nervous. Davies didn't give up easily. June stirred beside him, hair spreading across the pillow like spilled honey. Even after a month of marriage, waking next to her still felt like a miracle. He traced a finger along her shoulder, marveling at how fierce she'd been defending their land, how gentle she was in quiet moments. "You're thinking too loud," she murmured without opening her eyes. How do you know I'm thinking? You get this little crease right here. She touched between his brows. What's worrying you? Davies has been too quiet. June opened her eyes then, gray as morning mist. Maybe he's accepted defeat. Men like Davies don't accept anything. Calder sat up, reaching for his clothes. I need to check the horses. And I need to prepare for the territorial inspector. He's coming next week about the school certification. June stretched. Rosa's already planning a feast to impress him. They moved through their morning routine with the ease of people learning each other's rhythms. June braided her hair while Calder shaved. He buttoned the back of her dress while she straightened his collar. Small intimacies that meant everything. I'll be teaching until noon, June said as they headed downstairs. The children are preparing recitations for the inspector. I'll try to keep my hands busy with work and off Davies's throat, Calder promised. But when he reached the barn, Hank was waiting with a grim expression. Boss, we got a problem. That new stallion you bought last month dead in his stall. Calder's blood went cold. Poisoned. Looks like... And there's this... Hank handed over a piece of paper that had been nailed to the stall door. Calder recognized Davies's spidery handwriting. Accidents happen, especially to those who forget their place. That bastard, Calder breathed. Get the sheriff. I want... Calder. June appeared in the barn doorway, her teaching forgotten. She'd obviously heard the commotion. What's happened? He showed her the note. Her face went pale, then flushed with anger. He killed an innocent animal to make a point. It's a warning. Back off, or worse happens. Then we don't back off. June's chin lifted. We push harder. June. No, I won't be frightened by a coward who sneaks around in darkness hurting animals. Her eyes blazed. The children need to see that bullies don't win. Calder wanted to protect her, to send her somewhere safe, but he knew that look. June would no more run than he would. All right, he said finally. But we do this smart. Hank, double the night watch. Nobody rides alone. The next days passed intense vigilance. June continued teaching, though Calder noticed she kept her rifle close. The children sensed the adults' worry, but threw themselves into preparing for the inspector's visit. It was Thursday when everything came to a head. June was teaching the older children about the Constitution when Tommy burst through the door. Mrs. Reese, come quick. There's men at your cabin, your old cabin. They're putting things inside. June's heart sank. She knew without asking what Davies was planning. Children, stay here. Read chapter 4 silently. She ran across the yard, finding several men carrying crates into the cabin she'd lived in before marriage. Davies stood watching, satisfaction written across his piggy face. What are you doing? June demanded. Why, Mrs. Reese, just storing some goods. This building belongs to the ranch, doesn't it? And my friend here, he gestured to a well-dressed stranger, needs temporary storage for his merchandise. June glimpsed inside the crates. Bottles of liquor, playing cards, other items that painted a clear picture. You're trying to make it look like I was running illegal activities. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Davies's smile was oily. But when the territorial inspector arrives and happens to check all the buildings, well, who knows what he might think? He'll think exactly what you want him to think. June's mind raced. Unless someone tells him the truth. Who'd believe you, a woman already dismissed from one position, living in sin before marriage, shooting men like some common outlaw? Davies stepped closer. Give up the school certification. Leave town with your husband. This all goes away. Never. Then you'll lose everything. The school, the ranch, maybe even your freedom if the inspector believes you are selling liquor without license. June heard footsteps behind her. Calder appeared, along with Hank and 2 other hands. Her husband took in the scene with one glance. Davies, he said quietly, get off my land. Gladly. My business here is done. Davies tipped his hat mockingly. See you when the inspector arrives. Mrs. Reese, do try to explain why your former residence is full of illegal goods. After they left, Calder examined the planted evidence. We could move it. He'll just say we're hiding evidence. He's probably already sent word to the inspector about suspicious activities at the ranch. June felt tired suddenly. Maybe I should withdraw the certification request. Like hell. Calder's vehemence surprised her. You think I'd let you give up now after everything? It's not giving up. It's being practical. It's letting him win. Calder gripped her shoulders. June, you taught me something. You don't compromise with men like Davies. You fight them with their own weapons. What weapons do we have? The truth and friends. He smiled grimly. Hank, ride to town. Bring Judge Morrison and Sheriff Curtis. Tell them it's urgent. Calder, what are you planning? Trust me. He kissed her forehead. And keep teaching. Don't let the children see you worried. June returned to her classroom. Though focusing was difficult, she could hear riders coming and going, voices in urgent conference. When she finally dismissed the children for lunch, she found the yard full of people. Judge Morrison was there, along with the sheriff, Ruth from the boarding house, even some of the families whose debts the judge had bought. Calder stood at the center, calm and commanding despite still favoring his injured leg. Thank you all for coming, he began. By now, you've heard what Davies is trying to do. Plant evidence, destroy our school, drive us out. I'm asking for your help. What do you need? This from Ben Sawyer, whose daughter Sarah was June's star pupil. Witnesses. When the inspector comes, I want every person here to tell him exactly what kind of man Davies is, what kind of teacher June is. Make it clear that any evidence found was planted. Davies won't like that, someone said nervously. He still holds paper on some of us. Actually, Judge Morrison spoke up. He doesn't. As of this morning, I've purchased all remaining debts, fair terms, reasonable payment schedules. A murmur ran through the crowd. June saw hope dawning on faces that had been resigned to Davies's control. Why would you do that? Ben asked. Because I believe in justice and education. The judge looked at June. My grandchildren are learning to read because of Mrs. Reese. That's worth more than money. One by one, people stepped forward. Ruth spoke about June's kindness to travelers. Rosa testified about her dedication to the children. Parents shared how their children had bloomed under her teaching. This is all very touching. A cold voice interrupted. Davies stood at the edge of the gathering, the well-dressed stranger beside him. But Mr. Thornberry here is already on his way to meet the inspector. He'll testify about the illegal goods he was asked to store in Mrs. Reese's former residence. Actually, the stranger said, I won't. Davies turned, shock spreading across his face. What? Sorry, Davies, but Judge Morrison made me a better offer. The truth, plus clearing my own debts, beats your threats. Thornberry faced the crowd. Davies hired me to plant those goods, paid me to lie to the inspector. I have his letters discussing the plan. The silence was deafening. Davies's face went from red to purple to white. You can't prove anything. It's your word against mine. And mine, Sheriff Curtis said, producing a paper. Warrant for your arrest? Davies, conspiracy, attempted fraud. And that's just the start. The rustler you hired sang like a bird. This isn't over, Davies snarled as the sheriff cuffed him. You think you've won I have friends who'll distance themselves faster than scalded cats. Judge Morrison observed, crime doesn't pay. Davies, neither does cruelty. As they led Davies away, the crowd erupted in celebration. People who'd barely spoken to June for months now shook her hand, thanked her, promised their children would return to school. Calder found her in the midst of it all, pulling her into his arms regardless of propriety. We did it. You did it, June corrected. That was brilliant. I learned from the best. He grinned. My wife would have charged in shooting. I figured we'd try her other talent first, inspiring people to do right. The inspector arrived 3 days later, a stern man who examined everything with sharp eyes, but faced with a united town praising June's teaching, parents eager for proper certification, and children who could recite poetry and solve complex mathematics. He had no choice. Congratulations, Mrs. Reese, he said, signing the certification. Dust Hollow School is officially recognized by the territory. You'll receive funding for supplies and a proper salary. June clutched the paper, tears threatening. A real school, real recognition. No one could take this away. That night, she found Calder on the porch, watching stars appear. She settled beside him, fitting perfectly under his arm. Thank you, she said quietly, for believing in me, for fighting beside me. Always. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Though I draw the line at you shooting any more rustlers, my heart can't take it. June laughed. Fair enough. I'll stick to shooting down bad ideas instead. Much safer. He was quiet a moment. June, are you happy? She considered the question. A month ago, she'd been alone, unwanted, sleeping on floors and fighting for every scrap of dignity. Now she had a home, a purpose, a partner who saw her strength as something to celebrate rather than suppress. Yes, she said simply. Happier than I ever thought possible. Good. His arm tightened around her. Because I plan to keep you that way. They sat in comfortable silence, watching night settle over their land. Tomorrow would bring new challenges running the school, managing the ranch, building their life together. But tonight, peace wrapped around them like a quilt. No more sleeping on floors, Calder murmured, echoing her thoughts. Never again. June agreed. This is home. Yes, he said, turning to kiss her properly. It is. Inside, Rosa was preparing dinner. The children's voices carried from the bunkhouse, practicing their letters. The horses nickered softly in the barn. All was as it should be, a life built on courage, partnership, and the radical notion that everyone deserved dignity. June had found where she belonged at last. Not just in a place, but in purpose. Not just in a house, but in the heart of a man who'd defend her right to be exactly who she was. The stars wheeled overhead, and June Reese, teacher, wife, defender of justice, was finally, truly home. The land dispute arrived with the spring floods, washing away more than just winter's grip on the valley. June first noticed something was wrong when she saw Calder at his desk before dawn, studying papers by lamplight, his jaw set in that particular way that meant trouble. What is it? She set coffee beside him, noting the official seals on the documents. Harrison Fletcher. The name came out like a curse. Claims he has prior rights to our water access. Filed papers saying my father's original claim was invalid. June's stomach dropped. Without water rights, the ranch would die. But your family has been here for 20 years. And Fletcher's been waiting for a chance to take it for 21. Calder rubbed his face. He owns the big spread east of here. If he controls our water, he controls everything. June sank into a chair. What do we do? Fight, but Fletcher's got deep pockets and territorial connections. Calder's smile was grim. This won't be like dealing with Davies. Fletcher plays by the law, just bends it to his will. The next weeks brought a parade of lawyers and surveyors. Fletcher himself appeared one afternoon while Calder was in town, finding June teaching in the schoolhouse. He was everything Davies wasn't: tall, well-dressed, with manners polished smooth as river stones. Mrs. Reese, he removed his hat. I hoped we might speak privately. June kept her voice pleasant. I'm teaching, Mr. Fletcher. Perhaps another time. This concerns your students' futures too. He glanced at the children, who watched with wide eyes. Without water, there's no ranch. Without the ranch, no school. Then it's fortunate the water rights are clearly ours. Are they? Fletcher produced a paper. This survey says otherwise. But I'm not an unreasonable man. There are arrangements that could benefit everyone. June recognized the dance. What kind of arrangements? Your husband is struggling. The injury last winter, the legal costs now. I could make it all disappear. His smile never wavered. All I need is cooperation. Meaning? Sell to me. Fair price for the land. Water rights included. You and Calder could start fresh somewhere else. Somewhere more. Suitable for a woman of your obvious education. This is our home. Is it, from what I hear, you've been here less than a year, hardly deep roots? He leaned closer. I know about Cedar Falls, Mrs. Reese, about why you really left. Do you want that following you here too? June's spine stiffened. Is that a threat? Merely an observation. The Territorial Education Board might be interested to know they certified a teacher with such a controversial past. Get out! June's voice could have frozen flame. Now! Fletcher donned his hat. Think about my offer, for the children's sake, if not your own. That evening, June found Calder loading rifles with Hank. The set of their faces told her Fletcher had pushed too hard. He threatened you. Calder's voice was deadly quiet when she told him about the visit. He tried, but Calder, he knows things. About Cedar Falls, about why I was dismissed. Everyone knows. You've never hidden it. But the way he said it, like he has documents, testimony, things that could hurt the school. Calder set down the rifle. June, look at me. I don't give a damn what papers he has. You're my wife. This is our land. He doesn't get to drive us off with threats. What if he's not bluffing? What if the water rights? Then we fight harder. He pulled her close. But we need help, legal help. Judge Morrison recommended a lawyer from the Capitol, a sharp woman named Catherine Winters who arrived on the stage 3 days later. June liked her immediately, steel-gray hair, no-nonsense manner, and eyes that missed nothing. Show me everything, Catherine commanded. Every paper, every survey, every scrap of evidence dating back to the original claim. They spent days combing through documents. Catherine interviewed old-timers who remembered Calder's father, tracked down witnesses to the original water agreements. June helped, her education proving invaluable in sorting through legal language. There, Catherine said finally, pointing to a line in an old survey. Fletcher's claim is based on this boundary marker, but look at the original territorial map. June studied it. The marker was moved. The flood of '71 changed the creek bed. Exactly. Fletcher's using the new position to claim rights to the old water flow. It's clever, but not legal. Catherine smiled like a wolf. We can beat this. But Fletcher wasn't done. The morning of the hearing, June woke to find her schoolhouse vandalized. Nothing destroyed, but books scattered, slates broken, and painted across her blackboard, "Radical teachers aren't welcome here." Don't, June said when she saw Calder reaching for his gun. That's what he wants, for you to do something rash before the hearing. He comes after you again. He won't. June began cleaning up, hands steady despite her anger. Because we're going to destroy him in court. The hearing was held in the town hall, packed with spectators. Fletcher had brought his own lawyers, smooth men from the Capitol who spoke in complicated terms designed to confuse. Catherine let them talk, then stood with quiet authority. Gentlemen, let me present some simple facts. She laid out the case methodically. The original surveys, the witnesses, the evidence that Fletcher had knowingly filed false claims. June watched Fletcher's confidence erode with each point. Then Catherine called June to testify. Fletcher's lawyers immediately objected. Mrs. Reese's past makes her an unreliable witness. One argued. A woman dismissed for insubordination, who lived unmarried on the property, is exactly the kind of witness we need. Catherine interrupted. Someone who understands what it means to fight for what's right, even when it costs everything. June took the stand, meeting Fletcher's cold eyes steadily. She testified not just about the water rights, but about the ranch's role in the community, the families who depended on it for work, the children who learned in her school. Mr. Fletcher talks about prior claims, she said clearly. But the truest claim to land isn't paper. It's sweat, sacrifice, and service to the community. My husband's family has all three. Mr. Fletcher has only greed. Objection, Fletcher's lawyer shouted. Sustained, the judge said. But I've heard enough, Mr. Fletcher. Your claim is not only dismissed, but referred to the territorial attorney for investigation of fraud. The courtroom erupted. Fletcher's face went dark with rage as he was escorted out. Calder caught June as she left the stand, not caring who saw him kiss her soundly. My brilliant wife, he murmured. Remind me never to face you in court. But the victory celebration was short-lived. That night, as they prepared for bed, the sound of horses made them both freeze, many horses riding fast. Calder was at the window instantly, rifle in hand. Fletcher's men, at least a dozen. He wouldn't dare, not after losing in court. Men like Fletcher don't accept losing. Calder was already moving. Wake Rosa. Get to the root cellar with her. I'm not hiding while you... June, please, I can't fight if I'm worried about you. She saw the fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. Together, she said firmly. We face this together, or I don't go at all. He knew that tone. Stubborn woman, fine, but you take the rifle, stay behind cover. They positioned themselves as Fletcher's men surrounded the house. Fletcher himself rode to the front, just out of rifle range. Reese, he called, let's discuss this like civilized men. Nothing to discuss. Calder called back. Judge made his ruling. Judges can be wrong. Papers can burn. Accidents happen. Fletcher's voice carried cold promise. One way or another, I'll have this land. Over my dead body. If necessary. June sighted down her rifle, aiming for Fletcher's hat. The shot rang out, sending the hat flying. Fletcher's horse reared. The next one won't miss. She called clearly. And before you threaten my husband again, remember I'm the one who shot those rustlers. My hand doesn't shake. Silence stretched taut. Then, incredibly, Fletcher laughed. You chose well, Reese, a woman with spine. He wheeled his horse around. This isn't over, but tonight you've earned a reprieve. They watched the riders disappear into darkness. Calder turned to June, something like awe in his eyes. You magnificent, terrifying woman. I protected what's mine. She set down the rifle, hands finally trembling. But he'll be back. Let him come. We'll be ready. Calder pulled her close. Besides, word will spread. June Reese shot the hat off Harrison Fletcher himself. Nobody will dare cross you now. The rest of the night passed peacefully, but June knew this was just the beginning. Fletcher wouldn't forget the humiliation, but as she lay in Calder's arms, listening to his heartbeat, she felt no fear, only determination. They'd fought for this land, this life, this love. They'd keep fighting as long as necessary, because some things were worth any battle, a home where children could learn, where hard work was rewarded, where two people who didn't quite fit the mold could build something extraordinary together. No regrets? Calder asked softly. Never, June replied. Though I am glad I've been practicing my shooting. His laugh rumbled through his chest. My warrior wife, what would I do without you? Sleep peacefully and die of boredom, she suggested. Probably true. He kissed her hair. Thank you for standing with me, for being who you are. Thank you for letting me. Outside, dawn was breaking over their land. Their water still flowed. Their home still stood. And June Reese, teacher, wife, and apparently feared markswoman was exactly where she belonged. The battles weren't over, but then the best things in life were worth fighting for, and with Calder beside her, June would face whatever came with a steady hand and a steadier heart. The first snow of winter fell like whispered promises, soft and silent in the early morning light. June stood at the kitchen window, watching it dust the yard where she'd first arrived over a year ago with nothing but a worn bag and stubborn pride. Now, the view included her schoolhouse, the expanded barn, and the small cemetery on the hill where they'd laid Eleanor's memory to rest with honor, not erasure. Calder appeared behind her, arms wrapping around her waist, chin resting on her shoulder, remembering, thinking how much has changed. She leaned into his warmth. This time last year, I was sleeping on Maybelle's floor, or would have been, if not for a certain stubborn rancher. Best $10 I ever spent. His lips brushed her ear. Though you've cost me considerably more in ammunition since then. She laughed, turning in his arms. Perhaps you shouldn't have taught me to shoot so well. Perhaps not, but then who would have saved me from rustlers and land grabbers? His hands framed her face. My fierce, brilliant wife. A knock interrupted them. Rosa entered, eyes twinkling. The children are gathering. They have something special planned. June followed curiously to the schoolhouse, Calder close behind. Inside, all her students waited, from little Maria to nearly grown Tommy. They decorated with paper stars and evergreen branches. Surprise, Sarah stepped forward. We wanted to thank you, Mrs. Reese, for everything. 1 year ago, you came to teach us, Miguel added, his English now clear and confident. But you taught us more than letters. You taught us to think, to question, to dream. Each child came forward with something, a drawing, a poem, a small carved figure. June's eyes misted as she accepted each gift, each representation of how far they'd come. Tommy, now taller than her shoulder, handed her a leather-bound journal. We all signed it, so you can remember your first class when you're teaching our children someday. Oh, June's voice broke. Oh, you dear ones. But the biggest surprise waited outside. The entire town had gathered Judge Morrison, Ruth, the ranch hands, even some who'd once whispered against her. They'd set up tables in the barn, laden with food. What is this? June asked, overwhelmed. A celebration. Judge Morrison said, 1 year since you arrived and started changing Dust Hollow for the better. I didn't change anything alone. No, Ruth interrupted. But you showed us change was possible. A woman who spoke her mind, who wouldn't be cowed, who fought for what was right. You gave our daughters a different future just by being yourself. The party flowed around them music, dancing, stories of the year's trials and triumphs. June found herself pulled into dance after dance, Calder watching with that quiet smile that still made her heart skip. As evening approached, she slipped away for air, finding herself at the small cabin where she'd first lived. The door stood open, and she peered inside, clean now, empty of Fletcher's false evidence. It waited for its next purpose. Thinking of moving back, she turned to find Calder behind her, snowflakes catching in his dark hair. Never, just remembering that first night. You offered me this place, and I said, you'd sleep on the floor, he finished. And I said, not while I'm breathing. June smiled at the memory. Did you know even then? Know what? That we'd end up here, together. He considered this. I knew you were different. Proud but not prideful. Strong but not harsh. I knew I wanted to protect that. Protect you. He stepped closer. But love that snuck up on me slow, like spring after a hard winter. By the time I recognized it, I was already lost. And now I can't imagine any other life. He pulled her close as snow continued to fall. June, there's something I need to tell you. Something Rosa noticed before I did. June's breath caught. She'd wondered, these past weeks, about the changes in her body, the morning queasiness, the bone-deep tiredness. Calder, "You're carrying our child." His voice held wonder. "Rosa says probably come summer." June's hand went to her still flat stomach. "A baby, our baby." "Are you happy?" She answered by kissing him soundly, pouring all her joy and hope into the connection. When they broke apart, both were breathless. "Though this might complicate my teaching, we'll figure it out. Hire an assistant. Maybe one of the older students could help." He grinned. "Besides, knowing you, you'll be teaching until the day you deliver, then back at it within a week." "You know me too well." She looked back at the cabin. "This would make a good second classroom for the evening adult classes the judge wanted." "Whatever you want, though I draw the line at you teaching while armed." "That was one time. 3 times. I've been counting." They walked back to the party hand in hand, June's free hand resting protectively over the new life growing within. The crowd welcomed them with cheers and raised glasses. A toast. Judge Morrison called out, "To June Reese, who reminded us that courage comes in many forms, who showed us that the strongest foundations are built on respect, education, and refusing to accept that's how it's always been," as an answer. "To June," the crowd echoed. "And to Calder," June added, raising her own glass, "who saw a stranger in need and acted with honor, who defended what was right even when it cost him, who proves daily that real strength lies in lifting others up, not keeping them down." "To the Reeses!" someone shouted, and the toast became a cheer. Later, as the party wound down and guests departed into the snowy night, June and Calder sat by their fire. Rosa had tactfully retired, leaving them in peaceful solitude. "I have something for you," Calder said, producing a small package. "For our anniversary." "But it's not." "1 year since I paid for your room, since everything started changing." He handed her the gift. "Open it." Inside was a key, ornate and old. June looked at him questioningly. "It's to a safety deposit box in the Capitol," he explained. "I've put the deed to the schoolhouse in your name alone. Whatever happens to me, to the ranch, the school is yours. No one can take it from you." Calder, tears threatened. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did. You've built something important here, something that will outlast us both." He took her hands. "I want our child to grow up knowing their mother shaped this town's future, that she stood up to powerful men and won, that she never ever slept on anyone's floor because she knew her own worth." June wiped her eyes, laughing through tears. "You impossible, wonderful man." "I learned from the best." He pulled her close. "No regrets." It was their question, their touchstone. June considered it seriously, thinking of all that had passed, the gossip, the threats, the battles won and lost, the nights of worry, the days of triumph, the transformation from stranger to teacher to wife to soon-to-be mother. "Not one," she said firmly. "Every hard moment led us here. I'd ride through a dozen blizzards, face down 100 Fletchers, teach 1,000 stubborn children, all to end up right here with you." "Good, because I have a feeling our adventures aren't over." He rested his hand over hers on her stomach. "This little one will probably inherit your stubbornness and my refusal to back down. We'll have our hands full." "Heaven help us all," June agreed. "Though at least we know they'll never lack for education or backbone. Or love," Calder added softly. "Never that." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire die to embers. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in pristine white, but inside was warm, safe, home. June thought about the woman who'd stepped off that stagecoach a year ago, proud, desperate, alone. She'd been prepared to sleep on floors, to accept scraps of dignity, to fight every battle solo. Instead, She'd found partnership, purpose, and a love that strengthened rather than diminished her. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for seeing me, the real me, and not trying to change it." "Thank you," he replied, "for reminding me that living is more than just surviving, that some things are worth fighting for." "Worth shooting for, you mean," she teased. "That too." He stood, pulling her up with him. "Come to bed, Mrs. Reese. Tomorrow you have minds to shape and conventions to challenge. And you have a ranch to run and a wife to keep out of trouble. Full-time job, that last one. You knew what you were getting into." "Best decision I ever made." He led her up the stairs, pausing at their bedroom door. "June, that first night, when you said you'd sleep on the floor. Yes, I knew then I'd never let that happen. Not while I'm breathing. Not for you. Not for our children. Not for anyone under our protection." He kissed her gently. "This is home. Safe, warm, and yours by right." "Ours," she corrected. "Built together, defended together, shared together." As they prepared for bed, June caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman looking back stood straight and confident, the star comb gleaming in her hair, wedding ring catching the lamplight. Behind her, Calder moved with easy familiarity, their life together written in every comfortable gesture. No floors, no charity, no compromise of self. Just love, respect, and the promise of tomorrow growing beneath her heart. June Reese smiled at her reflection, then turned out the lamp. Whatever came next, they'd face it as they'd faced everything else together, unafraid, and absolutely refusing to accept anything less than their worth. In the darkness, Calder's arms found her, pulling her close. "I love you," he murmured. "I love you too," she replied, "always." And in the little town of Dust Hollow, where the snow fell soft as hope and the future stretched bright as stars, June Reese finally, truly, completely belonged. "Not while I'm breathing," he'd said, and he'd kept his word. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope June and Calder's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine while sharing it. Where are you listening from today? Please leave a comment below. I'd love to know where in the world this story has reached and hear your thoughts about June and Calder's romance. If you enjoyed this tale of courage, love, and standing up for what's right, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850. Give this video a like and hit that hype button to help more people discover these stories of the American frontier. Until next time, partners, keep riding tall in the saddle.